Hey guys, my name is Rai. Today I wanted to go through and walk through my plus 14 Dawnbreaker key. I did his preservation. I had a couple people reach out in my stream asking particularly about how I handle this dungeon, so as I kind of played this video through, I wanted to make a couple comments on what I did throughout the key, how to ensure my team's best success, and some mistakes I actually did, and I thought this was a good video for a couple of them that some people might make when they're doing this key. The build I ran was pretty standard. I didn't swap out anything. I'm not running flow states. And particularly here, as you could see, I don't have an AUG. I have nothing crazy. This is just me and a couple friends going into this key for the first time. This first pull is actually kind of scary. If you don't really get a little bit of pre-healing out, it's really easy for somebody to get globaled by a cast or the curse. I usually end up committing stasis here because the meta route right now is that you're not actually lusting this pull, but you're lusting the second pull. So keeping stasis here and allowing it for a little bit of healing ramp gives you a little bit of downtime to be able to make sure that in case somebody gets scoped by a cast, a cursed, or they get targeted by the Stygian, you have enough healing to kind of keep them up in their cooldowns in the opener. Again, I would try to not commit too much here because Lust is going to be your next pull, but a big combo here that I use pretty frequently is making sure I have Echoes out and go into a Lifebind window for Spirit Bloom, and that does seem to be able to top people most of the time. You can see here we actually have a little bit of a hiccup as some of these mobs, the Curse Blades, were bugging out from the side and ended up killing our team. So this line right here on the stairs is actually considered to be a boundary in the game for some reason, so if you walk past it, they will reset the red. So we did have an unfortunate death here right off the bat, kind of unlucky. See, as we get up here, this is probably going to be one of the higher damage parts of the key, but you are going to be in Lust. So a couple things to note is your tank's going to get a bleed on him, which is cauterizable. It's up to your discretion if you want to cauterize him if you're tracking his cooldowns, or just use off CD. The second thing is the Stygian debuff absolutely blasts, so making sure that you have a lot of healing rolling on your party at all time and you're dispelling the cast that goes out is pretty integral. I would save at least a wall and renewing blaze for trying to be up here, but again, you can be really liberal with all your healing cooldowns, including Emerald Communion, Rewind, Rescue, and Time Dilation. You're not going to need these for probably the next 5 to 10 minutes of the key, so you can use everything on this pack to stay alive, and I don't think you're going to really regret not using them here. One thing I did note too is that on the boats, you might see that there's some weird rescue pathing. As you can probably see like a couple seconds ago, I actually went and tried to rescue our shaman. It sent us back and forth, but a good trick with this is making sure that you get on top of the person you want to rescue, so it's not jumping them like 8 different places. This does take you guys out of globals, and can be kind of costly. So you can see here, right, Hollow dropped pretty low from a cast. I kind of got a little bit greedy because I was actually greeding for damage with Living Flame. I wouldn't recommend doing that here. I'd make sure that you guys have ample healing, making sure that you can top your party through a lot of these. It is a lot of damage. I find this spec to be pretty easy. You're not going to really have to do much, but I would be cautious about tracking party-wide defensives. As you can see, like the Cocoon Burst here is actually pretty deadly. I always try to pre-ramp a Spirit Bloom or use something like, either a Light Spark Brock or a Golden Hour to make sure people are topped. Your tank can also get pretty globaled here if you're not really careful. Make sure you're helping to kick the Web Mage. On the next pack as well, if your tank gets a Web Mage cast on top of a bleed, you can die pretty quickly. It's something that kind of sneaks up on you as the key levels go up. A reminder, if you're playing with a Death Knight DPS, they can pre-AMS the Cocoon and not get the debuff at all, which is pretty cool. As you can see, I accidentally flew in here and pulled the mobs, but a little bit of lunch. Here's a Burst Cocoon on me. You can do one of two things, and you can see here I pop Blaze and Scales. The reason why is I don't really need Scales or Blaze in the boss fight. When you're thinking about your defensives and 13 to 15 keys, you should think ahead. Using them pretty liberally is always pretty optimal, given that in most keys, there are a lot of trash packs that won't do anything to you as a healer. In Dawnbreaker, however, there are a lot of instances where you're going to need your wall, you're going to want Blaze, you're going to want Communion, and you're going to want a healing cooldown. As you can see here, I'm kind of light on myself, but that's okay. I have lots of healing, and I got sacked from my paladin. Can't remember if I called for it or not, but he is tracking my things as well. I did have one charge of scales, but I opted not to use it because of the sacrifice. Again, if you can start watching my paladin tanks health here, he actually does get a little global, but he is managing a lot of the kicks. When you can dispel a bleed, make sure that you're also giving them a little bit of healing. I think like all the tanks that I've healed at this point do require a little bit of healing on the bleed if you can't cauterize, especially if the mob's not getting kicked. This boss is one of the 3 bosses in Dawnbreaker, and I consider it to be the easiest. And I think most of you that are watching this video probably haven't had too much problems with this boss, but there are a few tricks to kind of get a hang of this, especially dealing with the debuff, that can make your life a little bit easier. On this boss, I always choose to keep 1 charge of hover, making sure that I can blink out of the pools that are coming up. In this composition, we do have 3 range, so there's a chance that it actually doesn't go on me at all, but you can see pretty quickly, like I get in there, and I'm out of the bottle already. As you notice, kind of going into this healing debuff ramp, I actually put on echoes on everybody in my party, and the reason why I do that is because getting the instant Verdant Embrace into Lifebind, and then keeping like a big Spirit Plume on the party, is going to be your quickest way to top the party off the debuffs. I usually try to stasis the first one, not for anything particular, just because it saves me globals. I don't think there's anything really challenging to heal in this fight, but what you can get caught in is if you get the debuff before you have to fly up on your dragons and fly off the boat, it is possible that you can have a team member die, as they'll be constantly taken down. As you can see here, I got echoes out of my party, I Verdant Embrace, and I Q a Spirit Plume right before the Obsidian Beam. My tank did call for time dilation on this mechanic. One thing, if you're pugging, if you're tracking your tank's defensives, using time dilation on them if you see that they're weak, like if you're running with a BDH, they don't have Brand or Feldev, or the Prop Paladin, maybe they don't have Sentinel, AD, Tier, Wings. Prot Warrior, maybe they don't have a wall, or especially a Guardian Druid if they don't have Incarnate or Rage the Sleeper. Using time dilation on this mechanic can actually save your key. I think the only hard part about this fight is actually your tank living. But as you can see here, we're not really struggling with anything this key. We're out of the pools pretty quickly, and I'm pretty outgoing my party on to the next ramp. I'm not going to talk too much more about this fight. I think it's kind of payphone, and as long as you do this really basic heal ramp, I think you can get through this entire fight's healing check pretty easily. Again, I just got back, and I haven't been gearing my Evoker too much. I've only been back in the game for about a little less than 2 weeks. So my gear's not absolutely stellar here. I think in this video I'm about 625, where in other videos, you know, I'm a little bit higher or a little bit lower, kind of depending on the content. So I don't think that, you know, you necessarily need gear to be able to do some of these keys. You do whatever is more important, is practicing kind of your healing cooldowns and your ramps. I think Dawnbreaker specifically is less of a gear check and more of a team coordination check. You should be communicating and talking to your team a lot about what you have available and what they have available to make your life easier. As you can see here, I kind of messed this one up. I kind of left a puddle really close to melee, but that's okay. As you can see at the end of this fight, we actually got the burning debuff right before the fight ended. I thought we were going to beat it and I didn't heal ramp for it. Luckily, it's on the Death Knight, and he just needs a little bit of healing when we get down here. Nobody perishes. I think, if I remember right in this video, this is the one where I start healing the tank on the gather, and I think I get globaled, but we're going to see here in a second. One thing about these mobs is they, for some reason, you know, really hate healing threats. They'll just choose to tank buster you. Yep, there it is. So making sure that you actually don't keep reversion on the tank as you kind of go down into here is a good idea. This happens to me on every sort of tank that I've played with, Prot Warrior, Prot Paladin, and a Brewmaster. So making sure that you don't have healing threats so you don't die immediately is probably a good idea. As you get down here, this pack, depending on what route you take, has a bunch of AoE damage. I don't think it's that deadly. However, in some cases, in another 14 that I ran later this weekend, we ended up doing a bigger Manifesting Shadow pack. So you're going to see that there's like some AoE going on here. But my team does manage to nuke it pretty quickly because we have defensive CDs. I usually do ramp stasis on that pack, and for the reason why is like once you get multiple shadow overlaps coming out, usually that whole pack is pulled all together. There's a lot of AoE damage towards the end of the pull. In some cases, and I think in the other 14 I ran, I was playing with a VDH, very similar comp, but with a VDH and a Boomkin. What ended up happening was we ended up using Rewind, Zephyr, Darkness, and everything to handle the Manifested Shadow casts. So talking about this mini boss a little bit, and this is going to be the theme of the next couple mini bosses, is that there's a big nasty dot that goes out here. One of the things that you need to know as a healer is that it is your responsibility at all times to make sure that this person lives. But however, it is on your team member to make sure that they're popping defenses during it. My tank opted for a pretty sketchy pull here. He decided to pull a bunch of the trash in here with the mini boss. As you can see, I start ramping my stasis with a large Spirit Bloom. I get a Dream Breath out, and I get TA. But there's multiple debuffs here on top of the fact that we're also dealing with the single target debuff, which is kind of scary. Stasis is going to help you here immensely, and I think another thing too is the more mobs that you have on these mini bosses, the more value you're going to get out of Fire Breath. As you can see here, my Death Knight actually got double debuffed here. Now my Mage has the big debuff. He manages to hit Greater Invis, and I've released my Stasis. One of the biggest combos I think here that is really important is using your Golden Hour and your Echo. I end up also using Community on this pack because we have Dark Flows going off on top of the debuff. However, there's one thing that you can kind of get away with on this trash, which is kind of useful. So because Golden Hour does more healing based on the damage taken in the last 5 seconds by party members, your first 2 globals on the target that get the debuff should actually never be the Golden Hour effect. Try to save your reversions for the 2nd or 3rd global, and the reason why is your Golden Hours are going to get more value as that dot ticks every second. Usually when a new debuff goes out, I put out an Echo, a Spirit Bloom, or maybe I use a Life Spark proc. Then as you can kind of see if you're rewatching this video, I spent the rest of my globals into Echo and Reversion, and even then when we get an overlap with other damage, I end up committing Emerald Communion. As you see, our Ellie Shaman's just absolutely blasting here because Ellie Shaman damage is a little broken this week. If you were watching my stream, the other one I did had no Ellie Shaman. I think we were even faster than the ski with no Ellie, which is kind of crazy. This pack seems to have become part of the meta route in Dawnbreaker, but I don't think a lot of people run it in pugs. Some do, and some don't. We do end up lusting this. This is a very high value count pack, so the only thing you really need to worry about in here is tank damage. As you can see, TD went red really quick there after my tank called for it, and I was kind of spending a lot of my global spamming him. But mostly for this pack, you can just get away with doing damage. I would babysit your tank as much as possible no matter what class they are, because any one of the tacticians can kind of queue up on you, sync you, and kill you pretty quickly if you're not topped, especially if you don't have a defensive roll in. But again, this is a big dungeon for single target triage healing and tank healing, so make sure that at all times you're healing your tank when you can, but also be wary of your mana pool and your resources available to you. I personally think for preservation, this is the hardest mini boss in here. The Orb Mini Boss is going to put out a deadly AoE similar to the second boss, the Instance. As well, we're going to have to deal with the debuff itself. One tip that you can actually get away with is you can LOS the cast of this debuff and have it apply to somebody else, but depending on what cooldowns are available for your team, it might be better off on you, kind of depending. As you can see, I actually renewing Blaze this first one, I queue up a Stasis, I do a full charge Spirit Bloom, I TA, and I Dream Breath. The reason why I do a full charge Spirit Bloom here in my Stasis is because I want to be able to get all the healing out to my team. As you can see here, I'm healing my Ellie Shaman with a Rescue, I'm giving him some Golden Hours, and I still have my entire Stasis ramp for the rest of this pack. I do get some pretty good value here out of Fire Breath, and I'm leaving that tick just to make sure that my party gets all the passive healing. As you can see now, it's going on my Mage. He does have Ice Cold, he does have G and Biz, I TD him, and I release my Stasis to make sure that there's no bad global. He also drops mirror images here. This one's a little scary. This one ends up going on my Ellie Shaman, and he doesn't really have any defensives. At this point, I have no TD, I have no actually big healing CDs for him other than rewind and tip the scales. But what I do here is next he get them topped, and then our mage is a little bit in danger. I did save my tip the scales particularly exactly for that that overlap right there, and he does manage to live with Ice Cold as well. And luckily this next one, we've gotten 0 good RNG in this pack, none of them won on Death Knight, so we had no immunities. This does go on me, and I do get an amazing value out of Renewing Blaze. I think we are end up top tier. I get a big Spirit Bloom out, and I think we get one more debuff before we move on. We do, and it goes in our Alley Shaman. As you finish these packs, know that you still have to continue healing this person with the debuff even after the mini boss dies, so I wouldn't get up and fly away just yet. Make sure that the player that has this is fully top before going on to the next pack. Again, on these packs, a lot of the coordination is really just to do with your team's defensives and watching them. You as a good healer have to be very wary of what your team has available to them and trusting that they will make the right choice when coming in. On this mini boss here, I chose to use Zephyr on the last pack, so I asked for AMZ here right off the rip. Just because the damage can be a little spiky off the rip. Usually people shouldn't die, but it does give you a little bit of time to kind of prep. Again, this is a really good Fire Breath value pack as you have 3 mobs. You can easily top somebody in a global if you get a good Fire Breath crit. As you can see by my cast sequences at the bottom, this is a lot of Echo into Golden Hour, into Spirit Bloom. And on myself here, I have Living Flint or Renewing Blaze, and I release my Stasis. When you do get to this pack, I think one thing you should be really cognizant of is using too much for the boss. I think you can get away with doing the next boss without rewind, but I think it's really hard to do without Emerald Communion. So trying to use as little as possible here is good, but also trying to communicate with your tank, right? Like if you need a second before you start the boss and the timer's fine, that's completely acceptable and they should trust you on that. You'd rather have a non-wipe on the boss and wait a couple extra seconds than, you know, lose the whole key. The death on the mage that I didn't want to talk about quickly, I could have saved him, and I think my communication this key was actually, like, I had everything for him. I had rewind, I had communion, and he should not have died. And ideally, this was a mistake I made. I don't think that I should have let him die here because he lost his Spymaster stacks. I should have committed rewind, I should have committed Emerald Communion, and I could have figured it out probably on this boss. But letting a team member die like that, especially as a caster who's utilizing the Spymaster's trinket, is kind of a big blunder, I think. But that is a mistake I made, and I don't really want to make again. As you could see, like rewatching that part of the video, I did have lots of healing up. I just chose not to use it because this was the first time I'd done this boss in 14. This is our first attempt at the dungeon on 14, and I wanted to make sure that, you know, we kind of knocked it out of the park. And again, this far, this has been pretty clean, right? We only had a bug death. I died to aggro from a tank buster. That was really not my tank's fault, and so forth. So this boss is actually pretty difficult. There are a couple tricks to it though. Using your party-wide defensives on the first one and using Stasis, I think is the best bet for making sure this boss goes smooth. Using Stasis with Spirit Bloom and Lifebind to top the first Orb Pit, and then releasing your Stasis on the Shadow Tick AoE seems to be like the best thing for me personally. There are a lot of ways to do this. Sometimes if you have to use Stasis on the pack before, maybe on the mini boss, you know, Stasis up, you can supplement this with just like rewinding off the go. If you haven't already installed it, make sure that you have a targeted cast on party members add-on. The reason why you want to do this is because on this boss particularly, those little adds, if they do cast on your party, especially during the AoE, they will die. They hit for an absolute ton of damage, you know, upwards of 30% of your health, and letting those casts go off could be the difference of losing a party member. So as you can see here, I'm ramping for the next one. We have animated shadows coming out, and I'm just going to passively Spirit Bomb my party. When the ads come out, this is a great time to use Fire Breath. Any healing that you haven't caught up on is going to be instantly top to your party using Fire Breath, thanks to Life Commander's Force. And here we're into the hard part of the fight. So Dump actually gets a bunch of casts and gets hit by the orb, and he's going to go down. And this was not my fault either. He actually has 3 stacks of the orb, and there's actually nothing I can do to save him. So my shaman did make a mistake there, but that was kind of out of my control. All right. The orb is pretty much unhealable. He got hit by an ad before the orb, then took 3 stacks of the orb and then died. But as you can see, my Lifebind, Emerald Communion there, carried the entire overlap and nobody else died. And our shaman almost did live too. You can see at this part of the fight, it looks like I have Zephyr, we don't have Mass Barrier, we don't have AMZ, we just have my healing. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I end up tip the scales with the Spirit Bloom, and I use Zephyr, and then I put some Echoes out, and I think here I'm just going to Life Bind, and there you go. There's my stasis. At this point, the boss is almost dead, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to trying to do here is saving a little bit of healing for the next mini boss, the last trash pack of the dungeon. I'm sure some of you have gotten there and had like, 8 to 10 deaths on that guy before. I think on beta, he was a little bit overtuned. They did nerf the trash so that no longer scales, which is nice. And here, as you can see, on accident, we ended up pulling in a bunch of trash, and we did not mean to do this. So Breath of Sindragosa, our Death Knight ability, actually ends up pulling in some trash, and we have to fight this at the end of the boss. Now, the nice thing about this is we still needed count, but at the same time, this was kind of scary for me. I asked my team to actually commit everything. We did save Mass Barrier, but that was, Astral Shift, that was Icebound Fortitude, we did have Sack go out, I did use Scales. So as we get up to this last mini boss, there are two things you should kind of look at doing here. One is that you probably do actually need to commit some healing cooldowns, but you really can't commit everything because the first phase, this last boss, can be a little dicey. With people picking up bombs, there's going to be a lot of damage going out. As you can see here, I start manually ramping Echoes on my party, and the reason why I do this is because they're going to get absolutely slammed by this first debuff. I tell them to trust, and I tell them not to health bot, because once I get that Life Bind out and that Spirit Bloom, even though I'm running very low mastery right now, my Spirit Bloom will still top almost everybody with Life Bind. I'm not running a lot of mastery at all on these keys, and I've chosen not to run them. I think that a lot of our healing right now is complete overkill, and cadence is more important than throughput. So I run a little bit behind here. I actually ramp late, and this ends up killing our mage. But it wasn't completely my fault because our mage and our Ellie Shaman were stacked up. But I think I could have saved them if I was a little bit quicker with the time dilation. But again, this one wasn't particularly my fault. It was more of my team's blunder. I think I get pretty mad at them in comms for, being where they were. Mage died very quickly. At this point, as you can see, I'm holding on to Rewind, I'm holding on to Emerald Communion, and I did burn Stasis. So here, I don't have any ramp going in. I think I end up using TD here. I do, on my mage. And the reason why is I didn't want him to commit a lot, but he does end up committing mirror images still. Shaman did use Bulwark Totem. So this trash is dead, we're at good count, and I'm at 35% mana. I think I tell my tank here that I'm completely fine. The reason is I am running Energy Loop to get back some mana. I think I only need like 50% to really get through here, but by the end of the fight, you'll probably be able to see. I'm not exactly fully tapped. I think I do still have Mana Pot, and I think I just used Emerald Communion, but this fight is pretty mana intensive as there's a lot of damage going on. In this first phase, I would definitely suggest rolling out Grace Periods, making sure you get some healing application in your party, and the first person that gets the line, just Golden Hour them. I do full Life Bind ramp this first one with Tip the Scales, Stasis, and Renewing Blaze. The reason why is like this first one, for some reason, like especially with everybody picking up the bomb, seems to be the most amount of damage. I do spot heal a lot of my team with Life Spark procs here, but I'm not really focused on damage in this first phase as much as I am just making sure that my team doesn't really have to use a lot of defensives. The next Erosive Spray is coming out. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to Life Bind, I'm going to wait a second, and I'm going to release my Stasis. I also did commit one charge of Scales here, and again, the reason why is I'm going to end up picking up a bomb. My DK almost does go down here because I tell him not to press anything. The bomb does tick you for a little bit of damage, so you do have to be careful. We do transition here. I'm at 27% mana, which, after a little bit of downtime is more than fine, I think, to the end of the next phase. Again, I'm doing about 1.4 million HPS in that first phase. I don't think necessarily that, that was very difficult. I ended up saving my Emerald Communion. I ended up saving my Rewind. The only thing I committed that entire phase, no Mass Barrier, was really Stasis, right? I think on the other 14 I did experiment with using Communion in the first phase because you do get it back late here. I think I sit on Communion for quite a while. If you do need the mana or you feel like you need the throughput, I absolutely think it's fine to end up using Communion here as well. The start of this phase here, I'm pretty sure I'm just blasting the boss and getting some value out of Energy Loop. I did have some friends ask me about Time in Need and how I felt about this dungeon. I felt like it's completely useless. I think Energy Loop has given me a lot more value in this dungeon. In the log, it gave me approximately 2.5 to 3 million mana, I think, over the key. But the thing is with Time in Need in this dungeon is it constantly just gets munched. People constantly drop below 20% and they're already being topped by your ramp anyway, so it's just completely useless in my opinion. As you can see here, the first Erosive race coming out, I do have echoes in my party. I get my last echo with my shaman, I lifebind with Rune Blaze, I send out my tip to scales, I hit that Spirit Bloom, and as you can see here, this is a really good trick, especially when you're ramping your stasis, is I actually send out a couple Chrono Flames right before I send out my Dream Breath, and that's because I want to get my Foresight active. So every time you cast a Chrono Flames, it's going to count as a bronze ability and give you temporal compression. So that's going to help you get empowered Dream Breath during that rot damage in this fight. I did commit TD on the Shaman because I told him to save wall because I'm not going to use TD anywhere else. And again, I'm releasing my Stasis here. My Stasis does get full value of temporal compression for both Dream Breath and Spirit Bloom, and so we're very, very healthy here as we kind of go into the fight. I am at, 25% mana right now. This next one, I believe, is my Communion ramp. I think Mage did commit Mass Barrier in the last one. I have no problem using a Spirit Bloom earlier to top those. I Zephyr. I commit one Disintegrate, and I end up using my Communion here. As you can see, I also did a 2-charge Dream Breath instead because I need a little bit less rot, a little bit more upfront healing. I did heal Sculpey there pretty quickly with the Life Bind. And this fight is really clockwork. This fight is really, really easy on Preservation once you get the hang of it. And the reason why is all the ramps are like very simple. They're very periodic and they're very easy to heal. So I do end up committing Rewind there because the boss is dead. And I use a Spirit Bloom with Life Bind. Like, at this point, it looks like I'm pretty tapped, and I'm using some Disintegrate here to get back some mana. This is a lot of healing, and the reason why I'm spending a lot of mana is because I'm doing a lot of single target healing, right? This is a lot of Echoes, a lot of Reversions, a lot of Chrono Flame, and the boss goes down. I think I still did have pot up. I think I could have healed this for another little while. I still had tipped the scales. I don't think at all, especially if remember I started this fight at like 50% mana. If I started this fight on full mana, I don't think I'd even come close to playing him, and I didn't really Disintegrate that much. But yeah, there you have it. There is a 14 Dawnbreaker time with my friends. Nothing too crazy, nothing too special, but this was what a couple of you had asked for, and I'm hoping that other people can find value in this as well. Good luck with your keys, good luck with your push, and good luck playing Preservation the rest of the season. I know I've been having a lot of fun with it. I just got back, so I feel like I missed a little bit of the game, but I'm having a blast. Anyway, everybody take care, and I hope you have a great week.